Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. Today's video I'm going to be doing the If I Owned a Bookstore tag, which was originally created by Bob at Robert G. Reader of Books, and I was tagged by Pat from Book Chat with Pat. So thank you so much to both Bob and Pat for creating the tag and for tagging me. And this is something that I have actually thought about a lot because I have worked in the book industry, both from the retail side and from the more creator back end side of it professionally off and on over the various years of my working life. And still, despite my inside knowledge of all of the work that goes into running a bookstore, I do still think that one day I would like to open my own bookstore. So let's get started with some of what Bob had to say about this tag. I'm reading the questions from my phone. He said, "It's time to indulge in a bit of fantasy, to imagine owning your own bookstore. In responding to the prompts below, pretend money's not an issue, that you are independently wealthy, but remember moderation in all things. Aesthetic considerations are your only criteria." Okay, so did feel that it was pertinent to note that I have had experience working in bookshops and working within the book industry, just because that is going to influence some of my answers to these questions. And also because I've thought about, one day further down the line, opening up my own shop. So the first question is, what are the hours of operation? This one's really important to me to kind of noodle on and think about because, again, over the various jobs that I've had, whether they were the late night shifts at retail stores or teaching, I have kind of worked somewhat odd hours, and so I've been a little bit more sympathetic to the need for bookish spaces to be open for people that are working non-traditional schedules. So I think what I would really prefer is an 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. for most days, but some days, maybe a couple times a month, I would like to have an extended hours where maybe the shop is open until 10 p.m. or it opens much earlier, before people have to go to work that day. Because I have definitely been there where I'm not able to get to the library during hours when it's open, especially since a lot of them remain closed on weekends. So maybe one weekend and one weekday a month, there'd be some extended hours, but I think 11 to 7 works best for what I would want. Number 2, is there ambient music and what kind? I think probably a little bit of yes and no. I would say that honestly, even overriding considerations of what kind of music, the volume would be pretty low. I really get stressed out going into stores that have really loud music, and working in stores that have had really loud music is just not my thing. I also think that it's important to me that the building itself and the business is very hospitable and accessible, and I want people to be able to go get their books without a lot of sensory overload. So I think there'd be some hours that are just quiet hours with no music, probably some hours with classic jazz type music. I like that kind of music. My husband likes that kind of music. And in this hypothetical bookstore, this is something that I think he and I are owning and running together. But I also think it would be fun at certain times of day or certain times of year to have some stuff more upbeat. I had a great time visiting Charlie's Books in Seattle, and they were playing a bunch of Chappell Roan music. Not overly loud, but it was definitely something that fit the vibe of a bookstore very focused on queer romance. One of the bookshops that I used to work at, which is Elliott Bay Books in Seattle, also had a really good playlist for around the holiday season. And one of my favorite things that would come on then was the John Denver and the Muppets do Christmas carols. We are huge Muppet Christmas Carol folks in this household, generally very much fans of the Muppets, and I grew up loving John Denver thanks to my parents. So I think it's gonna kind of depend somewhat, but like most things on this channel, be very much down to my quixotic personal tastes. Number 3, is there a coffee bar? Do you serve alcohol? So this is definitely one where my own experience is going to color my answer to this question. the book business and the cafe business are two completely different things, and while I find they do complement each other very nicely, I don't think there's necessarily like a strong reason where if you were trying to go for a bookstore, you need to also include food and beverage and vice versa. It's a whole nother set of skills, a whole different set of like people that you have to hire, inventory you have to manage, paperwork you have to do. And personally, if I'm the proprietor of the bookstore, I would not want to have to deal with all of that personally. However, I have worked in bookshops that had a cafe that was owned by the bookstore and like took place within the bookshop itself. This was when I worked at Books A Million was the big one that comes to mind. But I've also worked in plenty of other bookstores where the cafe shared the same space but was run by the restaurant next door, like Little Oddfellows Cafe is inside of Elliott Bay, or like when I was working at the comic book store at Pike Place Market in Seattle. We did not sell our own food and drink, but we were utterly surrounded by market stalls selling their own food and drink. So I think those can complement each other nicely. I think maybe what I would prefer is to have like a cafe or something like that next door, or something like how Elliott Bay had, where there was a cafe that was inside the bookstore, but it wasn't run by the bookstore, and so I wouldn't have to deal with all of that paperwork in the same way. That would be my preference. And as for serving alcohol, again, probably not. I just don't think that it would be worth the headache for me to keep up with all of that. And yeah, I don't really like having to deal with drunk people. No shade though. I mean, I definitely have enjoyed like curling up with a nice mulled wine or something like that while I read. Just maybe not at my own bookstore. Okay, number 4, are patrons encouraged to linger? Are there comfortable chairs? What kind of lighting? Are there tables? Are there areas for group gatherings? I think linger, yes. And I do think there would be some areas for group gatherings. Again, I don't necessarily want it to be like a setup where people feel like they can just come and, camp out with a laptop and not interact with anybody. It's not really going to be that kind of space, but I would like to have some comfortable seating for people to sit and read and enjoy their books. Probably a community gathering space of some kind for stuff like book club meetings or author events, or I know like one of my local indie bookshops here doesn't have a lot of interior space, but they really make good use of what they do have when they're doing their events for kids. They're specifically going to be running a like Halloween trick-or-treating type thing that I cannot wait to see how they pull that off in the tiny enclosed space. So yes, definitely got some nice comfortable like velvety chairs, stuff like that. As for tables, I don't think so. Again, like I don't want it to be the kind of place where people are coming and setting up with a laptop for 8 solid hours. There's a time and a place for that, but the bookstore image in my mind that I'm interested in cultivating is not going to be that. But maybe having like a table that we would bring out for certain events, or maybe if there was like a once a month, I don't know, like a tabletop RPG group or a D&D group or something like that met in a room. That might be nice, especially because that's like considered under the like book umbrella for me. This is kind of related to the answer I just gave, but number 5, is there live entertainment, such as poetry readings, authors reading from their current works, lectures in literature? Yes. I love going to these types of events. When I've worked at bookshops, I have loved hosting these types of events. They're great for the community, they're really good for business, and I actually think they are an important part of the function of a bookstore within like the community at large, or within the city or place where the bookstore exists at large. So definitely yes to that. I would also like to have some sort of like poetry reading or open mic night type thing, maybe with some like music opportunities, or people could like read their own short stories or poetry. When I was in graduate school, a lot of my colleagues who were in the MFA program in the English department had this like long-standing MFA open mic that they would do at a local bar called The Bull. That was always so much fun to go to. And that place also hosted a couple other open mics, more so for the community. People that were not in the MFA program could read their things for the open mic, and I think that would be awesome. Number 6, where is your bookstore located? In the busy heart of a large city, in a neighborhood of a large city, in a suburban strip mall, a small town, a rural area? I would like to be a person who is like an owner and proprietor of a bookstore in the community where I live. So given the community where I live right now, that would make it either a sort of like a suburb of a city or a neighborhood in a city. I live in the Baltimore area, and Baltimore has a very like thriving, great book culture. One of the city's nicknames is the city that reads, but there's definitely like uneven distribution of where the various bookshops are located. So ideally, I would be able to set up in a location that is not currently being served by that. But again, that's really going to depend a lot on where I live when I open this hypothetical bookshop. Number 7, how does your bookstore look from the outside? Sleek and modern, dark and brooding? I think it needs to look very inviting. It needs to have some big, like, warm lighted windows that I can build overly elaborate book displays so that I can also get my, like, arts and crafts love out. I think it needs to be pretty open concept. One of the things that I really like about the bookshop that I go to currently, again, they have a very small space, but their bookcases are more of those like windowed bookshelves where you can kind of see through the shelf, like through where the back of the shelf would be to the other side. So they're actually really able to get a lot of space, or the feeling of spaciousness, and even when they don't really have that much. So I think it needs to be very warm and inviting from the outside. I'm a big like gardener and plant lover, as many of you know who've been watching this. So I would also love to have different like plants or, window boxes, raised beds, something like that outside in the front. Nothing too extravagant, just something that, can be swapped out with the different seasons, and also just be very inviting and attractive for passerby. Number 8, what's your specialty? Used books, new and used, only fiction, only nonfiction, a mix? Does your bookstore specialize in a particular genre? I think it's not going to specialize in a particular genre. I want it to be a very sort of broad general interest bookstore, but I would like there to be like a strong contingent of genre fiction represented there. And this is where I really think that Elliott Bay, where I used to work, I keep bringing it up, but it does so many things right. As a bookshop, they have a very wide selection of different things. They're very intentional with the staff they hire and people that are like able to provide good recommendations and guidance on what kind of titles the store should carry. I definitely think one of the things I would like to cultivate is a wide selection of children's books, and then probably a selection of books that are published in languages other than English. Spanish is pretty widely spoken near where I live, so having some Spanish language books would be really, really beneficial, I think, and also just like more inviting to the community. I wish that my reading in Spanish was strong enough that I would be able to take a more active role in curating that, but that is something I would have to get back up to speed on again, because it's been a long time since I spent a lot of time reading in Spanish. But not a particular genre niche. I definitely think that like some of that's going to be a function of the people that you hire to be your booksellers. Another thing I would like to do though is have a mixture of used and new books. I think maybe mostly new, but there would probably also be like a used section. Maybe a book buyback. I kind of go back and forth on that. And I would also like to stock some things like, board games, jigsaw puzzles, some of the more popular tabletop RPGs, the kind of things that aren't books but aren't really quite sidelines either, that I think might be found in that like overlap of interest between book people and people that want to do other analog type hobbies. Number 9, what is the name of your bookstore? Again, this is something that I kind of go back and forth on a lot, but I think my working name for the bookstore is actually going to be Lily Pad Books. Back when I first started this channel, Sean's and my dog Lily was still living. Lily was the best ever little like yellow lab pit mix. She was sweet. I always used to tell people that she was part unicorn because she was just really that magical of a dog. And so many different things, you know, we decided, oh, if we ever were to do this event or open this type of thing, we'd want to incorporate her name in it somehow. And I think now that Lily is no longer with us, we lost her a couple winters back. But I think I would like to kind of honor her both as a great dog and also as my reading buddy. She was a classic booktube buddy in the early days of this channel. She loved coming and getting in front of the camera almost as much as she loved crashing into the stacks of books that I would have piled up and around. And I just think that that would be a perfect name. It also just sounds very inviting and a little bit whimsical, but still grounded in the earth and in nature and just in something that sounds fun. And I think the name really needs to match the vibe that we're going for with the bookshop. So Lily Pad Books it is. I can kind of picture a little bit in my head what I think it would look like. And the last question is to tag some friends, so I'm going to do that in the description box, but if you are not seeing your name there and you would like to make this video, please consider yourself tagged. Let me know when you make your own version of this video, and let me know, is this something that you ever also fantasize about? I have a feeling it's something a lot of us fantasize about, and I'm sure I'd have somewhat different answers to these questions. If it was more than just a fantasy, if I was taking those concrete steps to reality. But this was really fun, so thanks again to Pat and Bob for making the video and for tagging me in it, and thank you all so very much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye.